Love is Blind Villain Edition. Hey guys, I have completed Love is Blind, and this has been a very rocky season. Let's start off with Hannah. Now, Hannah is very emotionally abusive to Nick. And I started thinking about all the people on the show, and I feel like there's so many villains on the show. And so I'm going to approach it as a mental health aspect and apply them to a villain and maybe villain characters. So let's start with Miss Hannah. Now, Helen, in true villain fashion, one minute she's overly confident, and the seconds later she's super insecure, and she rapidly cycles between the two. And we never really know which side of her we are going to get. People have to walk on eggshells around her. They don't know which side of her they're going to get. She's emotionally unstable. She has a lot of toxic traits, insecurities, and she's always trying to get some sort of validation seeking. She comes off as someone who's desperately mature, and she states so, but she really is the exact opposite. So she's kind of has this facade. And this mask that she wears to hide, I think as a therapist, is she's hiding a wounded little girl on the inside and that she's too scared to show. She probably has some unresolved trauma. And in the show, we learned that she does have low self esteem. And this could be contributed to maybe an eating disorder that she had when she was younger because she talked about her mom locking up food and things like that. But she puts herself on a pedestal and everybody else is beneath her. She doesn't know where she belongs in the world, is kind of my take on her. And she's not really confident in her skin. Her superpowers are driven by fear, rejection, craving praise to feel secure, and she loses herself in almost every situation. And this is what we see time and time again in every single episode. She displays superficial charm, she's vengeful, and she needs a sense of control to dominate her partner in almost all situations. Some of her superpowers could include impulsivity, manipulation, poor emotional regulation. She would wear half mask. One side would look different than the other side, and her cape would flow with confusion, and she would have a high heels of deception, and her name would be Siren Shifter. I came up with this name because it captures her manipulative, her controlling nature, like a siren who lures others with charm, while the shifter reflects her chameleon like ability to adapt and change based on the situation to all who serve her own interests. In therapy, of course, this isn't a real diagnosis for her or anybody else I'm about to talk about. This is just giving off the perception of the show. If I were to diagnose her, I would diagnose her maybe with borderline personality disorder with narcissistic traits. And it would likely be evaluated through a combination of her relationship patterns, her emotional responses, and her overall behavioral tendencies. And if I were to give her some sort of therapy treatment, it would most likely be DBT. Let's go to Nick. Oh, Nick. Nick's behavior points to a dependence on others for basic life skills, who's often seen, um, he just doesn't really have it together. He's kind of a mama's boy. His continued reliance on his parents, where they handle all of his cooking and cleaning and finances, he even lives in their basement, suggests a lack of personal growth and self sufficiency. His inability to step in adulthood or any kind of independence really raised concern of any kind of ability to have a committed partnership or to even, if you think about a husband is the head of the household. I am not sure if he was ever really able to be in this role. And him partnered up with Hannah, I don't know. It kind of just felt like a disaster from day one. He comes off as emotionally stunted, and I'm not sure if this is Nick's fault or the fault of his possible helicopter parenting who enabled him. Whoever is at fault, it's a big one. His superpowers are complacency and codependency. If Nick was a villain, his costume would include a shield representing his parents who shielded him from the real world. He would have a sidekick because he would need one because he can't handle life on his own. Nick would have an avoidance cloak, which allows him to sidestep any important adult conversations and responsibilities. And he'd have one of those musician hats, the black ones that the rabbits come out. Ta-da! Except, you guys, he would use it to hide and withdraw like a child hiding under a blanket, like he's playing hide and go seek. And his name I got for him as a villain, the illusionist. And for those of you who know and have watched the show, he would come in riding in on a bouncing bunny. Like an illusionist, he tricks people into believing he's more capable and responsible than he is. The illusions allow him to dodge accountability and responsibility, leaving others to deal with the reality behind the smoke and mirrors. Let's go to Rams's mental health perspective. Rams, his actions clash with his overall beliefs, which caused him internal conflict. We might want to call him hypocrisy. In relationships, red flags for him are glaring. At first, I really liked him, but then we really started to see his red flags. His villain powers are powered by judgmental attitudes towards his partner's past, his displays of inability to respect difference of opinions and experiences, like Marissa's military background, even though in the pod, you guys, he knew her military background. She talked about it a lot. And in true villain fashion, he's convinced that he's the good guy, where truly he believes his actions are justified and he is better than she is. His villain response for contraception is clear. And he is adamant that he is wanting to have good sex, and having good sex means you don't wear a condom. He overrides the feminist values that he preached about, and he disregards Marissa's need for him to wear condoms. Let's not forget about his royal superiority and his hatred for, the military, which doesn't come off very well for Marissa. And you know what? He would ride in on his royal high horse, whose name is Hypocrite. That's what he would come in on if he was a villain. He would have shifty, judgmental eyes. They would resent they would represent his double standards, and of course his costume would be made of a rubber and condom material. Of course, it would chafe him in all his sensitive areas. His name, the Condemnator. As the Condemnator, he uses his moral superiority and progressive ideas as a weapon to control others while secretly undermining the very values he claims to uphold. For his diagnosis, it's not as clear as the other ones. In real therapy, I would probably take several weeks or even months to really dissect him, because we really don't have a full grasp on who he is as a person. But he has definite narcissistic traits. He might have passive aggressive personality traits, or he definitely does demonstrate cognitive dissonance, and some anxious avoidant attachments. But I would need to know more about his past and his family of origin. Leo's behavior. None of his behavior is covert. Everything is totally obvious. And you only need a pulse to see what's going on around him. He is riddled with red flags, manipulation, and Hannah and Brittany's relationship with him was insane. It was patterned by emotional manipulation and control, and his inability to tolerate rejection, demonstrated by Hannah's bullying when she tried to leave, only highlights a deep sense of entitlement and a lack of emotional maturity. This is a common feature of narcissistic personality disorder, where individuals use others as objects to maintain their self image and avoid emotional vulnerability. His shocking comment that he'd rather lose his family than his wealth? You guys, talk about a glaring red flag. His disgusting and sickening theme of materialism as a coping mechanism gives us all the ick. The ick. That was brought up a lot in this show. Oh, and he has unresolved grief. Totally. But that never comes up. He doesn't ever talk about his grief. He talks about money. You would think if he had all of these multiple deaths in such a short amount of time, he would be able to bond with the other people in the pods about the death, that he would be able to be vulnerable and open himself up about the deaths and what it taught him and what it learned. But he doesn't. All he does is flash his monetary stuff. Oh, I just can't stand him. Anyway, if Leo was a villain, he would have a Rolex on both wrists as cuffs. His hair would be made out of $1,000 bills, and he'd have an old school dollar sign necklace and it would shoot out love bombs. I crack myself up. He'd be wearing a onesie because he seems like a little kid. And to be those little onesies that has like the plastic feet on the bottom, the kind I'm talking about. And he would just be like a little man child. A little man child. Anyway, His villain name, let's go with Trust Fund Band and little onesie PJs. In therapy, Leo would be diagnosed with, well, what do you think? I'm beginning to see a theme in the show with his self obsession. You know what? I would definitely diagnose with Leo with narcissistic personality disorder, but I would definitely be addressing the grief and his avoidance personality in therapy. Let's go on to Stefan. He is the villainest of all villains and possibly the most villain of all of Love is Blind seasons. Most villains have a lack of moral compass, and Steven definitely fits the bill. In fact, he embodies a particular kind of supervillain fueled by egotism, obsessed with sex, and he oftentimes asking Monica to treat him like a piece of meat. He talks about sexual things that Monica is definitely uncomfortable with, and he smashes those boundaries time and time again. And he continues to talk about it even though she is totally uncomfortable. And on TV, he has a very superficial charm for to others, and he kind of reminds me of Gaston off of Beauty and the Beast. I don't know. He has a sense of entitlement. He needs admiration. He definitely objectifies women. And he has like this God complex and this whole persona that he's God's gift to women. He has diarrhea of the mouth, which is a huge red flag because he has really poor communication and he doesn't really let others talk. He's definitely in love with himself and he is, it's an unhealthy amount of love at that. These actions suggest a deep need for control, a lack of respect for the women, and he definitely displays, what do you think? We've been talking about it a lot. Narcissistic traits, the pressure for sex, and casual mention of women sliding into his DMs post show, and the fact that he admits to cheating on in the pod when he first meets Monica, then later says he was basically seeing a female when he was at a sleep study just days before his wedding, demonstrates poor boundaries, possible sex addiction, lack of impulse control, and just plain douchebaggery. If I'm honest, his assertion that men want sex all the time just perpetuates harmful stereotypes that signals possible issues around sex addiction. If Steven was a villain, he would wear an ass hat. Literally, he would wear an ass hat. His mouth would be one of those wind-up mouths, so that chattering kind that, like, bounce across the table because he doesn't shut up. He'd carry a very large, flashy cell phone for all those DMs that he'd be getting, and he'd always be on, I don't know, I envision Instagram, even though I don't Instagram. And he would have a lot of photos of himself in sexy poses. He would be wearing a purple velvet overcoat with a flower pattern on the back, and he wouldn't be wearing a shirt. He'd be baring his chest, and he'd be wearing tighty whities and snakeskin shoes. He'd be carrying a big book of the Encyclopedia of Sex with most of the pages earmarked. His villain name, are you guys ready? I thought long and hard about this. His villain name would be Charbulence. You know why? Because he thinks he's charming, but he leaves you feeling wrecked and needing professional help. Charbulence, like ambulance, charm. I love it. I crack myself up. Therapy, Stefan would be evaluated for shocking narcissistic traits, sex addiction. I would do a full sexual psychosocial on him, which is a thing in sexual and sex therapy. I might even look at attachment styles because something isn't right. There is something why he is the way he is. Just like all of us, there is a reason why we are the way we are. And most times it is deeply rooted to our childhood. Anyway, the moral of the story, be a hero and please get help before you get into relationships. Ugh. I think Love is Blind people, we need to do a better job of screening these people.